All right there, everyone. The collapse of NAFTA and the rise of a new era of economic nationalism. That's what we'll be talking about on today's video. Before we do, I just want to remind you that you can get our book, The New Nationalism, How the Populist Right is Defeating Globalism and Awakening a New Political Order. Free for a limited time as an ebook download on the link below. If you want a nice balance of the theoretical as well as case studies for the new nationalism rising up all around us, then this book is for you. It's my gift to you for free for a limited time at the link below. All right, so Fox Business is reporting that the United States and Canada have indeed reached a deal on what they're calling a new modernized trade agreement, which will effectively replace the 1994 North American Free Trade Agreement, better known as NAFTA, which was signed into law by Bill Clinton back in 94. The new agreement is now being labeled the USMCA, or the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. It's a name which reflects, I think, the nationalist tone of this agreement. In other words, we're no longer talking about a one-size-fits-all economic arrangement that's imposed upon the continent of North America. We're now talking about sovereign nations entering into a trade agreement. Now, what is so interesting here is that the ultra-liberal globalist Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, did not come to this agreement willingly. Mexico's already been there for some time. Washington reached a bilateral agreement with Mexico a couple of months back in August. In fact, Trump, in many respects, snubbed the Trudeau government. He left them completely out of the Mexico negotiations. Basically said that the whole notion of Canada's contribution is just not going to be a part of what the United States decides to do with Mexico in terms of trade agreements. So it was a clear snub against the Trudeau administration. I have no doubt that if there were a Prime Minister Ford, for example, then Trump would have taken a very different approach. Nevertheless, Canada, under the ultra-liberal Trudeau, has been dragging its globalist feet. And so President Trump threatened that if the Trudeau government doesn't come to the negotiation table and renegotiate NAFTA, he would slap very steep tariffs on all automotive imports. And really, that's all that Trudeau needed to hear. Such tariffs would be devastating on Canada's economy, and globalists are slaves to the economy. So I think Trump has figured out how to get globalists to do his bidding. He's found their Achilles heel, as it were. And so Justin Trudeau blinked. He bent the knee to the economic nationalism of Donald Trump and has agreed to open up access to Canada's highly protected dairy market to the United States, as it's already done with the European Union and Pacific nations, Canada, that is. Now, the reason why President Trump is renegotiating NAFTA in the first place is because he and many others see NAFTA as ground zero for the loss of manufacturing and industry jobs here in the United States as well as in Canada. Trade agreements like NAFTA have given transnational corporations full freedom to move factories and manufacturing and industrial jobs to the global south as part of something that scholars call a global division of labor, where manufacturing and industry have moved to the global south while finance and capital ownership has coalesced around the West, and particularly urban centers. And so as a result of this global division of labor, the United States and many Western nations have seen a dramatic decrease in the amount of industrial and manufacturing jobs. As a solution, the new NAFTA, or what they're calling the USMCA, would require 75% of all auto content and products to be made in the NAFTA region. So in its original form, that would be specific either to the United States, Canada, or Mexico. And the new trade agreement would require that 40 to 45% of auto content and products be made by workers earning at least $16 per hour. So these are important measures taken to reverse the global division of labor and bring manufacturing jobs back home to our heartland, and again, as well to Canada. Now, of course, President Trump's already been extremely successful in doing just that. In fact, the manufacturing industry alone, in that, we've witnessed over 200,000 manufacturing jobs created in the United States. Now, contrast this with the last year of Obama's administration, where we lost 16,000 manufacturing jobs. Economic nationalism has rendered manufacturing currently at less than 3% unemployment, which is the lowest we've ever seen. The latest trade agreement, I think, is also a great lesson on the nature of economic nationalism. Economic nationalism, the key here is that it's not simply a matter of protectionism. That's what many, I think, quite inaccurately, unfairly caricature economic nationalism as, or at very least those who just don't understand it. Many critics of economic nationalism basically reduce it to protectionism, right? You know, just the imposition of tariffs on all foreign imports. The problem with this reductionism, as Trump is showing us, with the diversity of his approach in various different trading nations, the problem with equating economic nationalism with what many consider protectionism is that there's simply no nation in this equivocation, right? Critics have wrongly left out the nationalist dimension when they reduce economic nationalism to protectionism. In other words, protectionism certainly involves statism. It certainly involves a proactive state imposing tariffs on certain goods or imposing certain requirements for what can be bought and sold. But those requirements considered in and of themselves are exemplative of statism, as it were, not nationalism. There's, of course, an important difference between the two. Statism involves institutional activity. It involves the actions associated with a governmental institution, while nationalism involves trans-institutional phenomena such as community, culture, custom, language, religion, ethnicity, and the like. Statism is institutional, while nationalism is trans-institutional and more cultural. And so the important point here is that economic nationalism may involve protection, but it can't be reduced to protectionism, as so many seem to think. And that's because, simply put, there's no nation or nationalism in a protectionist reduction of economic nationalism. Now, instead, as the name implies, economic nationalism is an economic approach that is intentionally pursued for the benefit of the culture, custom, and tradition that collectively comprise the nation. Economic nationalism is a facet of national identity where certain kinds of cultures, traditions, religions, ethnicities forge distinctive economic policies in accordance with specific national traits. And what this means is that economic nationalism could certainly involve protectionist measures, but it can also involve free trade measures. Economic nationalism can involve free trade approach as well as involving subsidized measures. It can involve ritualized measures. It can prevent certain kinds of economic activities on certain days or involving certain materials. I mean, we could go on and on. It could be free market. It could be regulated. Economic nationalism is by definition a thoroughly diverse approach to economic activities and markets simply because it's an extension of national identity. It's an extension of the customs, traditions, and religions that together comprise the culture of a nation. It's not an abstract economic theory that's lopped onto a culture. So if there were a single term that could be used as a definition for economic nationalism in relation to trade, rather than protectionism, I would probably go with something like bilateralism, which refers to the specific agreement between two nations for the purpose of mutual benefit as defined by national identity and custom. But more broadly, bilateralism can also involve trade practices that are specific to each nation, right? That mirror each nation. So if a nation is cooperative towards us, then we're cooperative towards it. If the nation puts up barriers towards us, well, then we put up barriers towards it. Again, the important point here is that economic nationalism is a highly diverse economic policy approach, as emphatically not reducible to the notion of protectionism, which really is an absurd reduction that fails to capture the diverse nuances of economic nationalism as we're seeing them played out in the policies of President Donald Trump. And so with the renegotiation of NAFTA, I think we have further evidence that President Trump, of course, keeps his word in terms of political promises. But more than that, we really are seeing the beginning of the end of the globalist-inspired division of labor and the rise of economic nationalism, further signaling the rise of a new nationalist populist age in our midst. As always, please like, comment, and subscribe. Click on our Patreon link below and become a monthly supporter of this channel. and help us to continue to analyze current events in light of conservative trends so that you can personally and professionally flourish.